Do you guys remember the days before cell phones? Do you remember the days before texting was a thing? Days before the internet, Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, and Candy Crush were conveniently at our fingertips. Back in those days, as many of you remember, if we went to a mall, maybe a coffee shop, or the airport, we did not have something that constantly preoccupied our attention. So we had a couple options. We could talk to people around us. Or we can engage in a great American pastime. Yes, a great American pastime called people watching. Now, granted, today, you can people watch with electronic device in hand, but you may become preoccupied by incoming emails, texts, and calls. When I was a young child, my Grammy used to love to go to the mall. She loved to take me, and she'd get a Diet Coke, and she'd sit at the food court, and with her undivided attention, she loved to watch people. She loved to observe what they were wearing, to see what they were doing. I did not truly appreciate such a pastime until I got much older. See, today, doing people watching is something that does come easy to us because as a baby, they want to know their world. And when we were young, we wanted to know our world too. It's just a part of who we are. We're curious. We want to know what's happening. Many times when we observe the world around us, and we observe people in their natural habitat, be it a coffee shop, we try to take what we see and what we hear and try to piece it together into the story, maybe of that person's life. We don't have the whole story, but we take what we can have and we try to make a story about that person's life. We may have an inner dialogue going on in our heads. Who is that person? What are they doing? Where are they going? Are they happy or sad? Do they realize that they have something on their face? What if I should tell them? Yeah, I won't do that. During this inner dialogue, it is easy to switch from just observing someone to judging them. Now, don't act like you have never done this before. Maybe you have thought to yourself, I can't believe he's wearing that out in public. Honey, that outfit is doing you no favors. I can't believe those parents aren't controlling their children in public. Their children are running amok all over the store. Without even thinking about it, it's so easy to pass judgment on to others. It's an effortless action. We may look at someone and make assumptions of what we see. Now, normally we don't broadcast these thoughts out to the world, at least not to that person. And while throughout our community we do judge others and others judge us, we don't expect to see it in church. Most of us don't expect to see judgment, shaming, and guilt in such a holy place. But sadly, churches are the perfect breeding ground for shame, judgment, and guilt. And they can be lurking just around the corner. Some faith communities focus so much on living a pristine life of holiness that they emphasize being this perfect moral person. And many people have a difficult time living up to those standards. For those who don't meet the faith community's ideals of what they should be, those people feel shame and believe that they're unwelcome in churches. On the flip side, however, if we've been around church long enough, we may take being holy as God is holy to a new and unhealthy level. We may come down with the holier-than-thou disease, which is like the flu. It is very contagious. And it can be spread quickly around the church if not stopped. When we become holier than thou, our reality becomes distorted. We think of others better than ourselves. We act as if we're climbing onto God's throne. And we tell God to scoot over so that we can sit on such a majestic seat too. And then we take it upon ourselves to judge others. We may look at them and judge for a multitude of reasons. Like they don't look like us. They don't act like us, or maybe they don't even think like us. Or maybe their families look different than our families. Or their lives look different from our lives. This week in chapter 2 and 3 of Gully's book, we learned that if the church were Christian, affirming our potential would be more important than condemning our brokenness. And if the church were Christian, reconciliation would be valued over judgment. Our gospel reading shows us how Jesus fulfills both of these statements and how he is an example for us to follow. As our story goes, Jesus was on his way to Jerusalem when he saw 10 lepers on the outskirts of the city. These lepers were considered to be unclean, untouchable, unable to be a part of the regular society, which was the very reason that they were on the outskirts of the city walls. Back in those days, they didn't understand leprosy like we do today. They did not know that it was a communicable disease that did not discriminate who was going to get it next. People got it from contact. It was common in those days to believe that people got leprosy by a sin that they had committed or by something evil that they had done. If someone in those days happened to be people watching like we do today, and they saw a leper, it'd be an easy assumption to wonder, what did that person do to come down with such a disease? What secret sin did that person commit for God to strike him down with such a horrible punishment? It would be easy to stand at a distance and to judge others. But that was exactly what Jesus didn't do. He did not speculate and judge from afar. He did not interrogate each person and find out their situation of why they are where they are. He did not condemn, shame, guilt. Instead, he had mercy on them. He saw their potential. And simply, he brought healing to their bodies. And he didn't even ask for anything in return. He just did it. The 10 lepers made their way to be examined by the local priests to be confirmed that indeed they were healed, so that they could come back and be part of society once again. Jesus did not just restore these people's physical bodies, he restored their families also, because now they could live with their loved ones. And at a last twist of the story, a last zinger that we get, the Samaritan leper, the person who was doubly unaccepted and despised for not only being diseased, but from where they came from. Seeing this person, we probably would pass the most judgment on that leper. But that was exactly the person who went back to Jesus and thanked him for the healing. You know, many of us may hear this story and think to ourselves, we don't really have anything to learn from this story. Number one, leprosy is a disease that is rarely found in first world countries. And we have a better understanding of how people contract diseases. And even more, we don't have divine healing like Jesus did. But even though all those are true, we can still take something away from this story. We can still see that like Jesus, when we see someone in our community or in our schools or at our church, we can see the potential in them and become their friend, their advocate, their ally, instead of just judging them from afar, or pointing out their flaws, or reminding them of their misgivings. Sometimes the hardest thing for us to do is to figure out what we've been doing, and then to humbly say, God, you can have your throne back. It's difficult to climb down from the majestic throne and to come down to reality with everyone else. It's difficult to remember that we have no place in judging others, no matter how much of a saint we may think we are. God, help us to see the potential in all people, this week and every week. Help us to lift them up and not to tear them down. Amen.